The types is arrays. It's a type of object in JavaScript that has some really unique functionality that you can do with it. They're useful for storing information, for sure. So right now, if we pretended we didn't have arrays, we wanted to have, like, record all these people, like we have person 1, person 2, person 3, person 4, to make a variable for each of them. It becomes unruly. If you have a database of just 100 users, which isn't much, that would be crazy to have, like, to do 100 variables for that. And maybe we don't know how many people we'll have in the beginning. Maybe we only know 3, and then, you know, a little bit in our code goes by, now we have 5. Like, how are we going to do that? And how would we iterate through this? This would be sort of a nightmare to iterate through. So, having a list of anything, which lists, you know, are used everywhere for things. How do we add, how do we remove? If we wanted to remove my mom, like maybe she has to go, like, get her hair dyed or something, and she can't come to the party anymore. Then, like, now we have person 1, person 3. That's awkward. There's no person 2. So arrays are great for making a list that would contain all these. We could just have an array of these things. If we wanted to remove one, that would be easy. If we want to add one, that would be easy. They have methods for all those things. So what is an array? An array is an ordered list. That is important that it's ordered. Or value that stores multiple values. Arrays are in a certain order. Every time you access that array, it will be in that same order. Same is not true for, like, an object. When you loop through an object with, like, a for in loop that we'll learn, I think, either Monday or Tuesday, you might not get the same values in the same order. If you do a loop through an array, you'll get the same values in the same order every single time. It doesn't vary. So here is our people array. And now we have all the values within the array, which is super useful. It lets us use only one variable to store it, which is way better than having 4, because it's less to remember. Like, what is person 1? We just have people. And we can access each of the people within the array. It's not like it's inaccessible. We can get each of them with the index. Remember that in an array, the first index is index 0. So it's 0, 1, 2, 3 with 4 things in the array. So syntax for the array. There's an opening and closing bracket. There are the square ones. It's separated by commas, the values of them. It starts at the 0th index, like I was saying. True is at index 0. The last element of the array is the length of the array minus 1. So sometimes you might have off by 1 problems in your code, and if it has to do with an array, it most likely is your the index and the length, there's a little bit off, so you need to remember that, like, the length minus 1 is this index. Because the length will still represent the number of elements in it. It's not going to take into account that it's a 0th index thing. Cool. Bracket notation. Accessing things in the array, if you know the index that you want to access it at, you want to use bracket notation. Well, there's other ways, but, you know, if you know the index, bracket notation is the most straightforward. So if I do array bracket 0, that'll get this first element in the array. Same with array at 1, we'll get you the second. Array 2 will get you the third. If you do array bracket and then an index where, let's say it's like at index 3, it's past the length or the values in the array, it will be undefined. But if you, and you can also reassign using bracket notation. So if you're like, okay, now the first value in the array is not the number 2, it's the number 5, you can do that through bracket notation. And this is, you can also add to it. So if you did array 3, because you know it's undefined, and assign it 6. So so I have my cats, and it's a boo, tiger, and orange. Again, not super, at a certain point we didn't get very clever with our naming. So if I just want to get like my favorite cat, which yes, I have favorites, it's cats at index 0, which will return a boo. So I can console log my favorite cat. Oops. And that'll give me a boo. And so using bracket notation and assigning it a variable is like a really useful way to pull out certain things from your array. I can also add to it. So I can say like cats. So we have 0, 1, 2. So cats at index 3 is fat cat. Yes, we have a cat that we call the fat cat. And then if we console log cats, we should see that one added to our array. If we said array index 4, it should add an undefined in here. Oh, empty item. I apologize. That is funky. It's nice. What you can do is cats.length if you want to add to the end of it. I'll show you other ways to add to arrays, but for now, if you want to use bracket notation and add to the end, this is an easy way to know what the next index would be on your array. One thing so we learned during types yesterday that array has a type of object. Many things return type of object. So sometimes when we are checking for something, we have an array, we have a variable, we think it's an array, but we want to check. One nice thing that array has is array. So we can do var is this an array is, and then you do capital array dot is array, and you invoke it with the array you want to check. So cats. So cats is an array. So if we console log this, we should see true, because is array returns a Boolean of whether or not what you passed in is or is not an array. Because if we do type of cats, we're going to get object, which is cool, and yay, it's an object, we know that. But it could also be like an object or a function. Well, no, type of function will return function, but it could be null and it will return object. So using array.isArray is much better if you want to really check if it's an array. If we put in my favorite cat, which is a string, it's a boo, we expect this to be false because it's not an array, which it is. Okay, cool. So bracket notation, looping through an array. Let's say I wanted to loop through an array. A lot of times this is useful, like, I don't know, maybe we want to loop through products that you sell, or let's say we have a menu, like lunch menu, and we have tacos, cheese, and fruit. And we want to loop through that and like do something on our app that does something with each of the things on our menu. We can do a for loop. So for var I is 0, I is less than lunch menu dot length. So having I is less than lunch menu dot length is great because lunch menu dot length will be one more than the index. So this is index 0, 1, 2. The length is 3. So as I is less than 3, so it'll do 0, 1, 2. If you want to do is less than or equal to, you'd want to do lunch menu dot length minus 1. And then you increase the I. So if we wanted to console log each lunch menu item with I, you do this. One thing I like to do, especially when looping through an array, if you're going to have like a nested array or something, declaring a variable like lunch item is lunch menu at index I seems to be not super dry code, but it makes things clearer, and especially when you're first writing something, it's better to declare many variables and go back and you can remove the variables if you want. But this is much cleaner to read with lunch item here than having, you know, if you have a nested one, you're looping through, you have an inner loop. Sometimes you have all these brackets. You might have done it with the vowel count yesterday. You have like bracket I, bracket J. That can get a little confusing of like what bracket I will be returning. So this way it's a little bit clearer. And then if you wanted to loop through the string like letters, you could J is 0, J is less than lunch item dot length, which makes way more sense than lunch menu bracket I dot length. We bring this up and console log lunch item J. So this will spell it out. So we'll console log the item and then we'll spell it out. Oh, that was because I did an I++ here. So we have tacos, then we spell it out. Makes sense how much easier it is re-signing. So yeah, looping through an array, really nice. One of the best things about arrays is you can loop through it, and because it's ordered, you'll get the same values in the same order. So if you have like a ranked thing where order matters, arrays are really useful. Any questions on this? Cool. So this is another example of looping through the people that you're inviting to the party. So you initialize the loop at 0, which is going to be the first index, so me. And then, like I was saying, the length of the array minus 1 is the last index. So since we're doing I is less than people.length, that'll be exactly how long we want it. And then it increments by 1. If you wanted to do like every other person, you could do like plus equals 2 or something, depending on like your use. But you know, typical, just loop through every element of the array. This is how you would make it. Nested arrays. Arrays are great because they don't just hold primitive values. You can have anything in an array. You can have, you know, an array of functions. Maybe you have an array of functions that you want to do something with, and you can even have arrays within the array. So you can have an array of arrays or an array of arrays. You can have whatever you want, which is super fun. So this is the one-dimensional array. This is what we most commonly use. It's just an array of values. It can be any type, including other arrays. So we can have this array actually be in an array itself. We went over the type of and the isArray, array.isArray. Remember to have this capitalized. You're passing the array in here. You're not doing .isArray off of the array. It's super useful when you want to be super sure it is an array. Because sometimes you can't do things with other things, like with other types that you can do with arrays. So you don't want to throw an error there. Cool. So here we have an array of numbers, and then we have another array of strings. And push pushes the array into it. So now we have an array of 3 numbers and 1 array that has 2 strings. Let's say I have my lunch menu, but instead of it just being a strings, I want to also have the price in there. So if I have the first one be a string describing what's going to be on the lunch menu, and then this being a number of like how much tacos will cost, we can have an array of arrays. This will be 3. We'll make, let's say it's like super fancy fruit, so it'll be $10. A nice way to see this, if you have your arrays a little bit more complex than just the like single values, is this is a great way to have like a 2-dimensional array formatted, because it's much easier to parse as like a human reading it. The machine doesn't care, but like it's nice to have something easy to read. So then if we did a for loop here, var I 0, I is less than lunch menu dot length, and then I plus plus, var lunch item array is lunch menu at index I. So if we console log out lunch item array, we should get this logged out, and then this logged out. Cool, and we do. So then if we wanted to use these, we could do console, we can do like var lunch description is lunch item array at index 0, because it's the first one, and then var lunch price is lunch item array at index 1, which is the second thing in the array. So we can say lunch description, oops, not in a string, lunch description is, and then $. Actually, I'm going to show you a fun little, this is a little bit of ES6. Nope, I don't have that. Never mind. You didn't see anything. Okay, so we have our lunch description. It'll say tacos is $5. Cool. So now we can like use the things in the array. If we wanted to then traverse the inside array, then we can do a for loop within a for loop, like I did above with the characters and like spelling out each of the things. You can also have it as nested as you want, but be careful when trying to log out something that's too nested. If you console log lunch menu, it should be fine to log that out. But if we wrapped each of these in like, let's see, that might be enough to like be like, oh, I don't know what this is. This is like an array of a something. So it'll be like, this is like, I only went a few levels deep. An array is in here. So if you get something like that, or like a bracket object or something like that, it's most likely that it's very nested in. And JavaScript's not going to do like a deep traversal of your array. It's going to just be like, I want a few layers, like I'll print this out when it's logging it. So if you see something like this, make sure that you would have to like go in and access the thing a little bit farther. But you could do that by doing 0, 0. Let's see. Let's go 3 levels deep. See if we can get it. Yeah. So it'll go a few layers. But you have to like get in there. And this is the way to get a few levels in. You just do like bracket, the index bracket, and it gets you that first one. So then if we did, if we took one of these out, we can see like what it is at each level. So you can see each time it goes one more in. And then it's this one. Does that make sense? How to like get farther in? One way, I'm going to go over push, pop, shift, and unshift a lot more later this afternoon. But adding to an array to the end and taking off the end, if I wanted to, I'm going to just go over that super quick just because I feel like it's useful to start thinking about now. We can do lunch, well, console, log the lunch menu. And then if we do console log, or if we, sorry, lunch menu dot push, and 3 as well, and then we console log it again. We've using the push, you push in whatever you want here, it'll add it to the end. Oh, that's interesting, it formats it that way. We could also, it doesn't have to be another array, it can be like a string. And then to pop it off, if we did lunch menu dot pop, and then we log it again, it'll be back to its original value.
Can you pop more than one thing at one time?
You can, but pop returns what was just like taken off. If we console log this, it'll be the string coffee. So you can't do like dot pop dot pop dot pop. You have to like do lunch menu dot pop each time, because you can't. If pop returned the array, then you would be able to chain it off. Cool. Yeah, and we'll go over this and shift and unshift more later this afternoon, but I figured it's a fun time to start thinking about it. Okay, like I was showing before, if you have it super nested, logging it out or returning it could be a little bit iffy. Well, returning it should be fine actually, and if you access it deeply enough, then it'll give you the value. Okay, so let's say we have a game, it has a grid, and we wanted to represent it with arrays. Does anyone have any ideas of like, what's a way that you would want to represent like this grid? It would be of values, maybe it's numbers, maybe it's strings, maybe it's booleans, true, false, just like a switch. And you want the grid to be just one array.
Like 2 dimensions by length.
Yeah, you could have a 2-dimensional array. And you could have each row is its own array. And you fill the array with arrays like this. So if you wanted an array, you wanted the default value, each row is the number 1 through 10. You could do an array of arrays like this, and you have your grid. And you can access a certain row, like the 3rd row, or the 3rd row, first one in the row, first column. You'll have a project, I'll open it up tonight, the Sudoku one. Arrays are really helpful in diagramming out a Sudoku board. It's very fun.
Question. So obviously, if you are looking at the grid and you were numbering that for a game, you would probably start at 1 and not at 0. And
Yeah.
so I know that you could, if you're writing loops or stuff around that, you could just do length -1 to have the things correspond.
Mm-hmm.
Is it ever the case where people choose to instead just always have the 0 index empty, and just so like 1 is actually corresponding to the first index?
That's a great question. I haven't really seen that places. I think normally they keep it with the first row as in the 0th index, and they just have to remember when it gets to the UI, where it's like the user will see it, number it 1 off.
Okay.
which is like a common problem that like remembering to number it went off. But yeah, great idea. The only problem is if you looped through it, you might have like an empty first thing, and that could throw an error or be an unnecessary loop through. Because if you're doing something super complicated in the loop, maybe you're fetching something from the database, which can take a long time. You don't want to do that like extra times. Okay, we talked about looping through nested arrays. You can do nested for loops. You can do for loops and for loops and for loops. I don't recommend it just because it could take a long time to loop through a thing as it gets bigger. But as many times nested as your array, you can like loop that many times, if not more. So this is an example of you have your grid and a row. So this is how the grid was made that we just saw. You have a row of like 1 through 10, and then for 10 times, so instead of like I of something minus length, you're going to do it 10 times. You're going to push the row into the grid. So we saw that adds to the end, and that'll create that array of arrays. And then if you wanted to loop through each thing in the grid, each individual square, you loop through the grid, and then you loop through grid index I. It would be a little bit easier when you're writing it to, every time you have a for loop, right away declare bar row equals grid index I. So definitely practice that in this next set of problems, because that will help solve probably some possible tricky spots. And then you just access it, grid index I index j, or row index j, if you had that variable. Okay, cool. Any questions on arrays, nested arrays, traversing them? Cool. You're going to get lots of practice with that this afternoon. Ternary operators, this is a little bit of a tangent, but this is a good place to sort of throw it in there. We've done a lot of if-else statements. This is just a shorthand if-else statement if you want to write if-else in like one line. So the way you do it is you have your condition, you have a question mark, then you have the code to run if it's true, and then the code to run if it's false. This is good if your if-else statements, it's just like a one-line thing inside your if, one-line thing inside your else. So I'm gonna, here's an example. So if emotion 2 is greater than 1, which it is, return underwhelmed. Else return, I don't know how to say that word. So this is like the if this, do this, else do this. And then when we console log emotion, which we're assigning the return value to this variable. This or this is the return value. Then we log it out. So day of the month. If it's an even day, then we take out the trash. I take out the trash, otherwise my roommate does. So we have this function that returns if the number is divisible by 2 evenly. So if 21 is even, then I do it. So the first one is if it's true, else my roommate does it. So in this case, 21 is not, haha, my roommate takes out the trash. And you can use ternaries as a way to return from a function as well, which is like really nice shortcut. But it can also get hard to read. So unless it's something short, like a string, me or my roommate, that's being returned, it's fun to practice. If you have an if-else statement, feel free to turn it into ternary and vice versa. But you also want to make it readable. So dance that fine line.
What about like your day-to-day operations? Do you do it like this with the vanilla statements, or do you do it?
I do a mix. Great question. I would say I tend to go more towards if-else statements just because it's clearer and easier to add to if maybe I want to do an extra thing in my if else.
Okay.
But if it's a simple thing, like I used one on Friday because if it's one day, then I want to use day in the UI instead of days. Like inbound email 1 day ago.
Okay.
If it's 5, I want to say days. I used it to say like if it's equal to 1 day, else days, as a way in the UI to do those like simple, small things.
Right, so if it's super simple, this is an easy way to do it. If it's more complex, if and else statements or
Yeah. And you can only have 2 things in the ternary. So if you wanted to have an else if, you couldn't do like another thing. It's just like if it's like this or that.
Okay.
Yeah, but great question. Yeah, it's definitely super useful way to make your code more concise if it's a simple thing. And it's a fun thing to play with. So definitely play with it today. And then I think that's the end. Are there any questions on any of this? Okay, cool. I'm gonna stop